Hello, my name is Amin Azam, and I'm on faculty at two campuses of the University of California. This video vignette is about the theory and rationale underlying problem-based learning. This video represents one of six of a series of videos and is the second of the 6 videos. Ask a variety of people why they use problem-based learning in their curricula, and you'll get a wide variety of answers.
So I'll give you my personal top 5 favorite answers for when I ask this question, what people will say. First of all, active learning is associated with a greater absorption and longer retention of content. Therefore, it's a more effective approach. Secondly, that students integrate the basic science foundations of medicine in the ways they're going to need to use it as clinicians. Obviously, this is specific to the use of PBL in medical education, though you could change the word medicine here to any other discipline, for example, law or business or other types of professional training. Third, no physician works alone anymore, so it's really become increasingly important to demonstrate proficiency in working with others. Again, I would argue that this is true regardless of the discipline, regardless of whether we're talking about just medicine or, again, law, business school, other types of professional training. Engineering would be another example. So it's really important to learn how to work together in teams, and PBL does that in a way that other types of curricular modules or elements don't. Fourth, this approach teaches a man, or a woman I should say, to fish, which is useful because medicine is a career of lifelong learning. So you're learning how to learn, not just what to learn. And last, my personal favorite, in this modern digital era of when our learners have all information available at their fingertips at all times on multiple screens and multiple devices, I don't think that any educational program should be in the business of information transfer anymore.
What then are the pros and cons of using PBL in a curriculum? Again, ask people who use PBL and you will get, once again, a wide variety of answers.
Here are my favorite answers. One of the big pros of using PBL is that there is a high faculty-to-student ratio. Of course, this is true in any type of small group learning. An additional pro of PBL is that there's generally higher student satisfaction. There's increased student autonomy and ownership of the process. And lastly, PBL is useful for areas in a curriculum where there are advantages to small group processes. For example, when you want to hear a diversity of opinions or perspectives that are valuable to be heard. One of the big cons of using PBL is it's logistically challenging. After all, it's just so much easier to just throw together a lecturer or to have a lecturer give a single lecture to a large group of students. Furthermore, there are risks of non-uniformity across small groups. What happens possibly if students are in the driver's seat? People worry that they won't necessarily cover everything they're supposed to cover. It is hard to get faculty to become process experts because we've been at this game for so long that we like to think of ourselves as content experts, as we are. But PBL doesn't value that content expertise. It really values the process expertise as much more so. Consequently, there's a lot of fears of letting go of the reins. As I said earlier, how could students possibly be in control of things? What might actually happen if we empower them? And lastly, there are some theories or people who believe that it's actually expensive to do PBL. I'm not actually entirely convinced at this point because, as you'll hear me say later in the module, the way we do PBL at Berkeley is such that we have a tiny number of faculty and we produce high quality medical students, and I think that we are doing it on a fraction of the expense of the ways other high quality medical students are produced at other medical schools. But I'll let you be the judge of that later in this module. Everything I've talked about thus far relates specifically to PBL as a specific session or element of a curriculum. But what I want to do now is talk about the PBL curriculum. That is, what if we're using PBL extensively throughout a longitudinal curriculum as opposed to just a single PBL session? And this basic concept is what I'll call an iterative process, which is to say that students or learners come back to some topic multiple times in multiple iterations. So PBL itself is based on experiential learning theory, which states that learning is optimized when learners encounter a problem and they use experiences that trigger questions for them. And after finding the answers to these questions, they can make generalizations which they then apply to novel but similar problems and broaden their experience. So let me animate that for you. Let's say that we have a theoretical PBL case of a patient who will turn out to have a myocardial infarction. At the beginning of the case, it just starts by saying, patient comes into your office complaining of or expressing concern of chest pain. So students working in a PBL will say, gee, what is this chest pain? We don't know what it is. And they'll use their life experiences or their learner experiences thus far to try to figure out what's going on. So one of them might say, my dad had this thing where he developed chest pain and it turned out it was a muscle strain from moving some furniture. So that could be possibly what's going on. They will then discover as they proceed that there's some questions where things don't quite make sense. So this case will say, oh, the patient says it feels like there's an elephant sitting on his chest and it radiates down his left arm. Well, the students will say, well, that doesn't make sense. My dad didn't have pain radiating down his left arm. And so then they will try to figure out and learn from what are the differences between the case in front of them and their previous experiences. So they might discover that, my dad's chest pain was worse on inspiration, and that maybe was because it was affecting his muscles. And so I'm going to make this general rule that muscular chest pain is variable depending upon inspiration and expiration. So they'll make these general rules. And then what they'll do is they'll apply those rules the next time they see or encounter a similar problem. And so they might then see a subsequent PBL case of a problem with chest pain, and they'll say, aha, is this pain worse on inspiration, therefore it must be muscular. And what might happen is that this new PBL case is not either muscular chest pain or a myocardial infarction, and it raises new questions for them. So once again, they have to modify their general rule, and then apply it to ever widening circles of problems or experiences. And what this does then ultimately is it creates this virtuous widening circle. Each iteration or pass through a topic, students are broadening, deepening, expanding their understanding of specific problems and generalizing that information and knowledge to other similar problems. So let's just pretend that we have a hypothetical PBL curriculum, which I'll pictorially depict here as this series of blue boxes running from the left to the right over the course of a curriculum. And let's also pretend that this is a bucket of knowledge that all students will want to learn about the renal and urinary system. And this bucket should be full by the end of the curriculum. In a hypothetical PBL curriculum, students will choose to learn what they do based on whatever cases trigger their learning. So these two cases trigger learning about the anatomy and physiology of the kidneys. And so these round balls represent times when they've begun to fill the bucket. So case 8 may also prioritize learning about metabolic and systemic disorders of the kidneys. Case 12 comes back to anatomy. It also is a time when students choose to learn about the treatment of the kidneys. So what you'll see is that these balls start to fill the bucket of knowledge. And I'll point out that students come back to topics, whatever topics they want, whenever they want. But you'll notice that they keep coming back to anatomy and physiology. So these, I guess we'll call them salmon balls, start to integrate in the bucket in the way that is different than a traditional curriculum where you're just filling on the bottom layer being the anatomy and physiology and then building on it beyond that. So you'll notice that the balls are all integrated in the colors, but in the end the bucket is full of knowledge the students needed to learn about the renal and urinary system.
And that's all I want to say about the theory and or rationale underlying the use of problem-based learning in medical curricula. Remember, this is one of a series of 6 videos, so if you like this one, watch another.